I looked at your LinkedIn and I saw that you have a history working with the Autism Speaks Foundation.
I do.
And yeah, I wanted to ask about that because my interaction with them many moons ago was to do like a benefit show with my band at the time, and we played in Tacoma Park, and it was like there was a walk. Autism Speaks does the walk down in DC, and we were like handing out flyers like come to the show. And
How long ago was that?
oh my gosh, so this would have been, gosh, 2009 maybe,
I
2010, something like that.
I wonder if I was there then.
Yeah, you might. I mean, we played a venue called the Electric Maid in Tacoma Park. I don't know if it's still there, but
That's amazing.
yeah, yeah. I used to work for what used to be referred to as a high functioning autism program at Sligo Creek Elementary School in
Okay.
yeah. And anyway, long story, but I was curious about your how you connected with autism. How did that world meet you? Yeah.
From one of my kids, yeah. And so I ended up, so I was volunteering for them for quite a few years when it was Cure Autism Now.
Mhm.
And then they were acquired by Autism Speaks, and was volunteering for them. And then they hired me. I was kind of in between things, and they hired me. So um, I ran that walk that you were at. I actually ran that for a couple.
Wow.
I ran it the second year, or maybe it was the first year. It was on the National Mall. I think the first and the second year I ran it with somebody else, and it was really, it's a big, powerful event.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and so you're an OG. You were there, but it was Cure Autism. Then it got acquired by Autism Speaks, and then
Yeah,
I've learned from those in the community that Autism Speaks, actually the community kind of had beef with Autism Speaks because of how they like represented those
yeah.
on the spectrum. And so is Autism Speaks still an organization, or have they been acquired or rebranded or?
No, they're still there. They're very, very large. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so surprising, but with most nonprofits, there's some group that is anti that nonprofit. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
it's so cool because with what I do now, the biggest part of my specialty is DBT, dialectic behavior therapy. And when you are thinking from a dialectical point of view, you could see that two things could be true at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That we can hold multiple truths, and nobody's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so we should maybe introduce, you'll be introduced to listeners and viewers in the pre-roll, but I always, folks who are longtime listeners to the show, ask about people's pathway
mhm.
and how did what was your first career?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So, I went to school for hotel resort management, and I came out of school and went into the food industry and sales. And so I was in sales, and then eventually was like in sales and marketing together, all in the food industry.
Mhm.
Was in that for a good most of my career. I worked for, first a food distributor, then a manufacturer, and with the manufacturer, I worked for them, and then um, that company went chapter 11 followed by 7, and I bought the intellectual property with some investors and started my own company. So really most of my background is marketing, by far
Mm.
my background, and I made a pretty drastic career change back in 2010, 2011. Went back to graduate school and started all over again.
Yeah. What sparked the awakening to, alignment with your purpose?
Yeah, so I was working at Autism Speaks at the time, and I was still in the food industry. I was kind of doing a little bit of both. And I saw a need in my work with Autism Speaks. There was a need to support the families of individuals with disabilities. And there weren't really the resources out there to help them. And so that was going to be my niche, which it was not, but that was originally my intent is, oh, I'll go back to school and I'll specialize in this. So I did that. And as I became more and more specialized in the modality that I'm most aligned with, I realized, to work with that niche is not really the best niche for me, but also, I just fell in love with the modality I was trained in and saw a better direction to go with that.
Yeah, and say more about that modality that you were trained in.
Okay, so while I was still in graduate school, I really focused on two things. And I'm a big proponent of things that are evidence-based. Okay.
Hmm.
So one was dialectical behavior therapy, which is the main thing that I do. I'm certified in it. There are very few people that have that certification. It's a very, very big process. And the other is Gottman therapy. So Gottman therapy is for couples.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of alignment between the two. They have similarities. There's a lot of crossover in the fact that both are relatively short term and they're evidence based, and that is everything to me. That there's been so many changes and different directions people go when they go to get therapy, and oftentimes therapy is dictated by what somebody's insurance plan will allow for, and so forth. And many therapists, getting a graduate degree and being able to become a therapist is one thing. That really has very little to do with what you do after that. It's really all about the specialized training afterwards.
Hmm.
And, there are many people that get their additional CEUs and things they're interested in doing. And there are very few of us that are like, wait, this is what I really want to specialize in. It's evidence-based. I'm going to follow the research and I'm going to do this right. And so that's my direction, is to really, minimize therapy for my clients. My goal is to bring them in, teach them how to become their own therapist, give them the tools they need, then they know how to do it themselves, and they'll come back once in a blue moon for a tune-up.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're speaking, you sound, what you're sharing sounds very similar to, my approach, or what felt aligned for me when I was in grad school. The idea being, um, what can we, how can we help people in a way that they can help themselves, and that can get I was like obsessed with like research and outcomes, and like what are, like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. What are the things that people are already doing so that people don't have to needlessly suffer any longer, than
Totally.
they, right,
Totally.
right.
Yeah. And the thing is, we get them in and out of therapy quickly. I know there are a lot of people that want to hold on to their clients, and they create dependency on therapy. If you do it right and you give people the help they need, the universe will just send you more people. You don't need to worry about that, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's not a problem. You'll keep filled. We're filled. I mean, that's not an issue. Um, the key is to really do what's right. That's going to make a permanent change in people's lives as soon as you can.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm wondering, what are some of the tenets of DBT that spoke to you? You mentioned kind of being able to both things can be true, holding paradoxes that logicians are like, wait, that doesn't add up.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, so DBT in its most fundamental way of describing it is to help people with regulating their emotions. Um, it is to help people understand their emotions, understand the functions of them, to be able to be side by side with any emotional experience that you have, and not have if you're in a car, instead of the emotion driving the car and driving it out of control at times, the emotion's in the passenger seat and you're simply observing it, and you could be side by side with whatever emotion is there. So, if you're able to regulate your emotions, more effectively, it's one of the hallmarks of emotional intelligence. It helps all of our relationships. It helps us professionally. It helps us in every aspect of our lives. And so many of us have difficulty regulating emotions because, as a society, we're taught to shove things down. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? When you were a little kid, if you accidentally touch a hot stove, you pull your hand back. Well, with our emotions, we do the same thing. If you feel sadness, oh, let's make that go away, or anxiety, fear, oh, let's make that go away. And instead, we have to understand that every one of our emotions has a function. We need them all. We want to make sure that we're utilizing them for the function they're meant to be, and that the emotion fits the facts to the situation. So we're not, having fear for something that's not really fearful. But knowing how to regulate, knowing how to understand whether it fits the facts and use them as they're meant to be used. And that is life-changing for people.
Mm. Yeah. What are some of the, I'm curious, what are some of the, when you say it's life-changing for people, maybe take our audience through a scenario in which when people come to see you, where are they at? Are they in crisis? Are they the worried well? And how do the teachings, and like when you say, I want therapy to, I don't know if you said want it to be user friendly, but I want people to be able to learn how to do it on themselves, take it with them, make it portable,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
So maybe walk our audience through, especially for our listeners who maybe have never gone to therapy or any kind of wellness to, they might be identifying with what you're saying regarding like pushing away their feelings
Yeah.
and saying, hey man, integrate these things is good. You're going to function way better. So take our listeners through that. Like, how do you help people begin to integrate these teachings, these skills?
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, right, we all have some difficulty with regulating our emotions. DBT was originally created to help to treat the hardest to treat patients. Okay. It was created by Dr. Marsha Linehan, and she came up with a way to treat people who are suicidal, who are self-harming, who are, really, really struggling, people who are not feeling hope and so forth. And she looked at some of the modalities that were available at that time, and none of them were right. She looked at some of the techniques that are very person-centered. And what happened is she'd sit with a client, this was all in doing her research, and they'd be so heavily validated that they felt good in session, but their lives didn't change. And then she would try some of the techniques that are more behavioristic and CBT and things like that, but people would shut down when pushed too hard. So the whole therapy is built around a combination, a dialectic of acceptance and change. And so when we're working with clients, that is the dialectic. In our practice, we have about 50 somewhat therapists across about 8 or 9 states now. Everyone is intensively trained in DBT, and we're really committed to doing it adherently. As far as your listeners, here's the good news. We have on YouTube a video for every single one of the DBT skills. And so they can watch that for free. It's accessible. Counseling Center Group, just Google that and look for our YouTube DBT skills. So you can learn the skills. And although DBT was created for the people who need it most, people who are suicidal and so forth, and it works, it is the most effective treatment for people with those for those behaviors. I passionately believe that aspects of DBT can benefit all of us. I use it every day in my own life, right? When you start to learn to live and think and act dialectically, it's life-changing, right? We're able to, look at our political climate and how everybody is like, you're this way or you're this way. It's either or. Everything is, you're right, I'm wrong. What if we're able to have conversations with people and understand that two things can be true at the same time, that there's a kernel in truth of truth in your point of view, and I could still maintain my point of view completely. I'm not going to change to your point of view, but I could have a conversation with you now because I understand why that makes sense for you to look at it that way. Now there's openness and curiosity, and that's what we're missing.
Yeah. I one of the things that stood out in your answer was your practice is obviously large, but that everyone is onboarded with, like, so if someone wanted to work for you and they, how the research shows, like, you get better outcomes if the clinician is aligned with the model, and if they don't really subscribe to the model, but they're going to use it, and it doesn't translate well. If someone they were interested in working for you, but they kind of rejected DBT, would that not be a good fit because it's the geese are all kind of working in the same ecosystem of DBT?
Well, Not necessarily, but sort of. So we have everybody, we have everybody trained in DBT because everybody can benefit and every clinician can use DBT with every client to some aspect, right? But you're not going to call it DBT unless you're actually doing the full adherent model. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, you're going to benefit from some of those teachings. What we do require is a practice that every single person is intensively trained or certified or, really thoroughly doing an evidence-based treatment that has a lot of research to support it and that it's relatively short-term. That's who we are. Evidence-based, short-term. Many of our team provides EMDR, which is and it's an incredible treatment. I'm trained in EMDR. I love it. You could help people, who really are struggling with things today because of things in their past and help make that separation for them. A huge percentage of our clinicians are trained in a newer modality called accelerated resolution therapy, ART.
Okay, that's what
and another short-term trauma therapy. Everybody's trained in CBT, right? So, that's the main thing is that Gottman is another one, right? That if they're going to work with couples, the main thing is they're trained in the gold standard of training in the modality that they choose. So if I'm going to be working with couples, you're not going to work with couples with no extended training. Like you have to have advanced training and really be able to provide couples with something that's going to work. There are people out there all over working with couples who have no advanced training other than one class in graduate school that was family therapy, which incorporated couples, and they're out there putting their own biases into relationships and taking sides. Is dangerous, So, I'm just really committed to actually providing, evidence-based treatment to our clients.
Yeah. You mentioned ART. What was that? What did it stand for again?
Accelerated resolution therapy.
Accelerated resolution therapy. And then also in your bio, you talk about MAPS. What does that stand for?
Okay, so MAPS is a newer thing. So I've been through the MAPS training program. It is MDMA assisted therapy.
Oh,
so
yeah.
As psychedelics are going to become, out there. It's not out there yet, but I'm trained. I am able to work with people who do ketamine treatment with integration. So I'm a big proponent that these treatments are extremely helpful. And I am also fearful that when they become out there, it's going to become the wild, wild west if people are not trained and working with people in a way that is helpful. So, it's really important with these medicines that you're creating set and setting first, that you're sitting down with clients and, having intentions, knowing that it's a safe space, knowing how to navigate the system, having them know what's coming and being prepared for it, and then taking what comes up during the session and integrating it so you get something out of it. It is a very non-directive type of therapy. And so when I mention Wild Wild West, what scares me are all of these people who are currently doing that kind of work on the underground and telling people where to go. Like that's not what you're supposed to do with that.
So. Yeah, no, I'm familiar with MAPS. I thought it was a different acronym for something else, but the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. Yeah. Rick Doblin. He's a get. I haven't got him on the podcast yet, but I do want to interview him. Yeah, I agree with you that the psilocybin, there's a lot of I understand the fear about the kind of information or misinformation when something's not regulated, and you do have people who are working with this medicine and working underground, and people recognize the power of it, and they're like, well, this is powerful. It's been culturally disavowed for decades here anyway, and so we're having a renaissance, but there's lots of ways to it's like having a vehicle without seatbelt laws or something. It's like there's a lot of ways that people can really hurt themselves. Indeed, you can. I just want to say, people who are longtime listeners, I say this all the time, so apology, but there's a lot of ways in which when you don't get permission and consent from all of the person's psyche and make sure that they don't, like the preparation sessions for if you have a good preparation session and you have a candidate who is ready, they're open, they're not afraid, and then you take them through the treatment sessions. And I totally agree about integration, being able to process that stuff shortly after, while the neurochemistry is still freshly unlocked, and
Yes.
all
Yes.
that. It's transformative. I mean, what's the guy? What's the guy's name from Johns Hopkins? Unfortunately, he's been diagnosed with cancer now. You know who I'm talking about? Roland Griffiths.
Oh, yeah.
Roland Griffiths. He may have. I'm blanking. There's someone else who developed the questionnaire. I had him on, and I can't remember his name, but the questionnaire for mystical studies, or for mystical experiences, and saying like, this is one of the most important experiences I've had in my entire life. Contrast that with someone who's been in therapy for 5 years, and they're like, I'm still doing the same old behaviors and habits and all that stuff. It's your concerns are totally valid, and there are practitioners out there that don't seem to recognize the importance of that permission piece. So the dosing, obviously, dose dependency. People microdose all the time, and that's different than 5 grams. It's but the most, I feel like, if I could only communicate one nugget for listeners on psychedelics, anyone, DMT, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, the most important thing in my view is making sure that the person who's endeavoring to change their life or their nervous system, that they're actually ready, and that they're not only part of them is saying, I just need to heal, I just need to change this, I just need to fix this, and they're completely bypassing the fear that they might have, or the I'm not ready for this, or I actually don't want to do this. Because that is a perfect recipe for a bad experience.
Well,
or
and
to re-traumatization as well.
Totally. And fear is expected and healthy, right? If you don't have some fear going into it, even if you've done, some of these medicines multiple times, some element of fear is expected, it's normative and important, right?
Mm-hmm.
The key is that, you're working with somebody who knows how to help you navigate that terrain, because it is a completely different terrain. And so, when you're in that world, you don't want to be running from things in that space. If something is being shown to you, it's there for you. And so you want to be able to move towards it because it's there for you. It's there for your learning. It's there for your growth. And knowing there's somebody sitting there with you in a safe, supportive way to help you navigate, that's what's so key. But that the person is not leading you. Hey, let's go to this thing. I'm a trauma survivor myself. I had a really bad burn accident where my body caught on fire. And so I know how re-traumatizing it could be if somebody takes you somewhere where you're not ready to go. When you're working with these medicines, your body has its own way of healing. Your body will bring you to where you're ready to go to when you're ready. And so that's the thing you have to trust. You have to trust your inner healing with it. We're going to be at the forefront of this work when it becomes legal and available. We're already, sitting with people who are working with ketamine, which is the only one that's out there and legal. But, as they become available, the key is that, you're working with people who have the advanced training, who know how to handle this safely, and can enable you to get the most out of it as well.
Yeah. Now, did you say that your practice does have clinicians who you do offer ketamine-assisted psychotherapy?
So we partner with MindBloom, and so we will work with their patients, and our patients can go there. So we don't do the administration, but we can do the pre-session. We could do the post-session even during.
Oh, that's great. Is MindBloom? Where are they based out of?
They're in quite a few states, but New York primarily. I mean, they're multiple states like we are.
Okay, gotcha. Have you yourself done ketamine-assisted psychotherapy?
In some of my training, I did one time try it, and and in my training with MDMA assisted therapy as well as psilocybin, I'm familiar with the terrain. I feel like different medicines have different benefits, and that's also important to talk to someone who really knows what the best fit is for you.
Yeah. Did you get anything out of your experience on ketamine?
I did. It's a different experience than some of the others. Again, it depends what you need, right? So for me,
Mhm.
as a burn survivor, something like an MDMA where you could actually go to a trauma, but from a distance and not be
Mhm.
re-traumatized
Mhm.
is a very different experience than something that's really, really evidence-based to help people with depression. It's just they're all different.
Yeah. Yeah. I I've only done it twice, and the first time I did it, I was completely rudely interrupted by my bladder, I, and I was, but the clinician in me was like, "Is this where I need, is this? Do I have like a psychosomatic overactive bladder thing, and that's what the molecule is trying to teach me right now?" And, but the second time I did it, like I said, I've only done it twice, and it was specifically for internal family systems clinicians. It was a group retreat, and the second time, same dose, but the second time, and I was very sure to limit fluids a day, and because I was like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to have that happen again. Second time, I was actually immediately after, I was convinced that I had communed with the divine.
Wow.
And then maybe like a day or a few days later, I was like, well, maybe not the big guy, but like one of his, associates, like an angel. But it
I
was,
love that.
it was a spiritual experience, very much pervasive to not just me and the ego complex that is called Robin Smith, but also my family, my friends, as well as complete strangers, first in the Bethesda community, because that's where I was laying down and putting the eye mask on and everything, but then like just generalizing outwardly to say like everyone is safe and loved and protected, and it will actually be okay, despite all the suffering that we as clinicians try to alleviate or prevent or all that stuff.
Right.
It was really that intuitive kind of non-verbal communication. So, we have a word called telepathy, but I don't know, kind of triggers people when you hear about that. They're thinking science fiction, but it really is a non-verbal intuitive knowing in that
It's a
spiritual
knowing.
realm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's knowing. And that is one thing I just love about that whole grouping of works is that, my biggest passion in all of our work is loneliness. I
Mm.
know I said it first. We have an epidemic of loneliness before the Surgeon General came up and announced that. I
Yeah.
said it first.
Yeah.
But it's my biggest passion. And the more and more time that goes on and the more that we become dependent on technology and interchange technology for face to face and now everybody's working from home and they're not rubbing elbows with somebody in the coffee room. I mean, this is all so damaging. And it's so amazing to know that there's work out there that could enable us to actually see and have a felt experience that we're not separate. We're all interconnected. We're all one. And most people never experience that at all. So, to me, all of this work is just so incredibly important. And the other thing, a lot of practitioners do tie with IFS, and many of the people on our team do as well, which is phenomenal. But another thing I'll add, which I think is really cool, is to tie it with EMDR. So in between sessions using EMDR, because EMDR to me as a therapy that does not have any medicines, it is the closest thing to doing psychedelics other than breath work. Because it gets you out of your thinking space of figuring it out, and it enables you, because you're having bilateral stimulation, to just make connections you wouldn't have like figured out if you're trying to think.
Mhm.
I feel like that really helps people integrate some of the psychedelic experiences so much further.
Yeah, it's funny hearing you say that because I very much want to believe you, and I don't know if that's true since I'm on like I don't want to say I really don't want to say I'm on team IFS, but I'm in terms of all the waters that we swim in,
Yeah,
if we had been having this interview years ago,
yeah,
I would be talking to you about how Gottman is so awesome. And I remember actually at the psychotherapy networker symposium, there was some funny like TikTok mashup, and I think it was like Bob's Burgers, the cultural reference of that TV show. And one of the characters is like, a therapist who just went through a training is like, this is me now. This is me now. This is me now.
well,
Like being, yeah, go ahead.
but the most effective EMDR therapists are using IFS with EMD. They're used together.
They
So
play
it's
together
not,
very well.
well, to me, they have like, how do you not, right? It's putting it all together. So you're taking the principles of IFS, you're working with parts, you're working with all of those things, but you're also getting people out of like cognitively thinking about it and instead letting it happen.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. I mean, so again, my bias is in IFS land. It is the same thing of identifying the cognitive parts, the intellectual parts, the rational parts, the skeptical parts that are like, I need the evidence, and the logical parts, the figure it out parts, all of that thinking team. This is why like hypnosis helps people also, is like all of that calms down and relaxes. It's why people can get, when they're open to messages in their dreams, all that stuff is not there analyzing, it's like relaxing. You're able to receive it all,
Yeah,
and I know that IFS clinicians know how to navigate that territory also, because
they do.
and I really see IFS as a psycho-spiritual model. And indeed, Dick Schwartz, he's really brilliant in making the model accessible to folks who are maybe not even spiritual, right? And but it is much larger than what it is if you read all the books or go to the trainings. Even when you go to the level 1, level 2, I think that realm and what IFS gives people, it's a lot larger than that. And so that's why, to me, it makes sense to like upload that in consciousness before taking any psychedelic medicine, because you do now
Yeah,
have a map for the territory.
totally. I 100% agree. Yeah, and hard to find people with that training,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
really difficult people because the wait list is so long to get into the training. The training is very, very long and intensive, like many modalities, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a tough thing. We have a couple people on our team trained, but not everybody, because it's not a simple thing,
Yeah. Well, and to your point, there was something I flagged that I want to get back to. I hope I remember it. But to your point about separation, you were talking about loneliness,
Yeah.
Marjorie, and you're talking to someone who's literally letting his lease lapse or not renew on September 20th, and going full-time virtual. So not going into the office and seeing people.
Uh,
And I'm very extroverted. So the only way that my system can be okay with that is to make up the loss of that by going into the community in person, not through paid commercial real estate, but just houses of worship or AA meetings, just going and doing pro bono work in person in groups. Because I, like you, see, the thing is, I'm making the assumption that someone like you who would develop a group practice, who would put the videos on the website to be like, yes, at your pace, if you're ready to learn this stuff, like do that, because
yeah,
that only accelerates or enhances, the healing.
yeah,
I'm very much in the same spirit of that. And yeah, I'm just curious about, I guess I wanted to come back to the importance of loneliness and speaking to people, our listeners, but the general culture of what can you share with listeners regarding loneliness, and what can help alleviate, cure, what leads to pervasive states of loneliness. I very much wanted to return to that theme with you.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think first off, we are in a society where we are focused on quantity. Okay. So, people have their different various social media platforms that they use, and they have hundreds of friends, right? Hundreds. And even outside of that, the people that, that they communicate with, the quantity is tremendous. And then what happens is they spend a lot of time efforting to make a plan to have dinner with somebody. And many of their friends, they're having dinner with twice a year. Okay. That's not that fulfilling. Okay. It might be fulfilling in the moment, right? And you don't want to eliminate those moments, but the efforting is what bothers me, right? So I actually, created this little grid system for myself. Okay. I took all of my friends and wrote down all their names. And then on the top, I wrote, and this is the way I phrase this question: do I love myself when I am with you? Okay. Because what that answers for me is, am I my authentic self in your company? Do I feel free? Or am I like trying to impress? Or am I just like, am I me? Because I love myself when I'm me, but when I'm like trying to fit in, or something about the energy isn't right, I don't, right? So if the answer to that is yes, then the next column is, can you commit? And what that means is if you want to play in the same box with me, I want a regular commitment. I want to know we're going to get together about once a month or at least talk. I want it to be regular and, have some sort of frequency to it. Because when you have those things, then you could like carefully curate your own group of friends. And it's a much smaller group and one that you could commit back to versus spreading yourself so thin between these hundreds of people where it's just a lot of efforting.
I really appreciate you sharing that, not only with our audience, but with me, because friendship and like, I do carry a story of like, I'm not a good friend. Like, I know I'm a good friend. And
Yeah.
yet I have parts that are like, yeah, I'm not being a good friend because of that spreading thin or the not committing. I have clarity on the difference of like an inner circle or secondary or tertiary, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And also just like it's funny, when we were in the midst of lockdown and the opportunity to connect virtually, was like, oh, we can actually get together. But the technology was there before the pandemic, but we didn't, we didn't use it. And then interestingly enough, also, I can only speak from my own experiences here, but I have to imagine I'm not alone, that after lockdown in this area was lifted, it was like, well, I want to go back to just, in person. And then the distance virtual connections kind of fell away. And I just went back into what I do, which is not hanging out enough with my friends, right? Like
Right.
the legacy burdens of workaholism or just being too mired in my responsibilities as a parent of young girls, like just I'm always justifying like, oh, I got to do this first, and then it's the eat your veggies before you get ice cream. But I like,
Yes.
from hanging out with friends, I never get I not want to say never, right? But like rarely do I get the ice cream. I'm always just like veggie focused, which is not a recipe for happiness. And so what you're speaking to is like the intentionality of like listing, can I be myself? Which I feel like I can be myself with everyone. I don't.
Mhm.
I really do. Like, it's just way less work to just
Yeah.
be yourself across.
It is. And at the same time, it's really important to notice your energy level when you're, when you're with another, like because we're different with different, we're the same person,
Uh-huh.
but the energy, it changes, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
where do you really feel that kind of burst of, wow, this is, just like it, you probably have friends you meet for coffee and, you think you're meeting for a half hour and 4 hours later, it's like you could stay there for all day and there's still more to talk about,
Well, that and also the sense of, I haven't talked to you in so long, and now that we're reconnecting, it feels like no time has changed since we were
Right.
together. That's like
Yes.
that kind of speaks to your notion of like, I want to commit. Are you willing to reciprocate and commit? And the
Mhm.
different flavor of you have your own standards about like, what's the right frequency for Marjorie
Yeah.
and versus, and I guess there are different people that have those different preferences, different groups of friends, that it's like, oh yeah, this is an old friend, but because of distance, time, or where they're at in their life stage and what their obligations are, I can't expect them to hang out for like happy hour every month or whatever,
Right. No,
Mm.
absolutely. And yeah, and respecting those, but it could be a phone call, right? It's just, are we going to have a regular commitment? I mean, like, as you mentioned, those friends who, haven't seen you in years and years, but it's like no time has passed. Well, that's because you've had a history and frequency at some point in your life, right? And that's what builds friendships. You need many, many interactions to really build the depth within a relationship. You can meet somebody, for the first time and really feel a connection, but it's the, repeated experiences that really build it to something bigger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wanted to come back to something I said I flagged, which sort of pointed to a little bit, but I want to expand on it, which is the notion of putting out the content there, that like the videos, the DBT videos and the skills, like there was a reason why you had the intention and taking the effort and saying, no, I want to offer this to people completely free of charge, right? It's out there anyway. Or are they videos that you filmed and produced, or are they Marsha Linehan's videos, or like what are they for skill building?
So they're all adapted from Marsha Linehan's work, right? I wrote the scripts, and within my practice, everybody narrated at least one.
Mhm.
And And then we have somebody internally that's been producing them. We did it because learning skills is all fun and interesting, right? You could learn a skill, you could come to DBT skills group, and skills group, the purpose of DBT skills group is for skill acquisition, right? To learn it. But if you don't generalize it, it's kind of pointless, right? It's just nothing more than it was interesting at the moment. So, we really want to find all different kinds of ways for our clients, and then also sharing with the broader community ways that you could actually generalize the skills. And generalization happens by having practice, but also repetition. So if they have a video they could just click on to remind them how to use a skill, then it could keep it going. So, for our clients, of course, that's, we want that we give them the video after they've learned it, like, okay, here, watch this on your own as well. But then we could share it with the broader community.
Mm. Mm. Are there certain skills that you find are the skills? I have not taken any advanced training in DBT. Are the skills hierarchical? Like you need to, like when you learn to become a black belt, like you need to learn the green belt stuff first before you go into blue belt. So, are they in order, or how does that work?
So yes and no. I mean, and first, let me just say that, people, when they think of DBT, they think, oh, DBT is skills, right? And there's so many, clinicians out there that maybe took a 1 or 2 day DBT skills training and think that they're providing DBT. So when you go to get certified for DBT and you're coded, you have to record sessions and you're coded, skills is maybe 2% of the whole thing. It's a very small portion of what DBT is. DBT as a treatment, and the reason I'm passionate about it is because it is not a come to therapy, let's talk about your problems for the week. We're going to kind of deal with some problem solving and talk about that. And I'm going to validate what you've been through. And then the next week you come back with a different set of problems. I mean, to me, that feels like whack-a-mole, right? It's like you just hit one down and the next week it's something else. Yeah. DBT, you're not doing that at all. In fact, the whole entire treatment is based around a life worth living goal. Like, what would make me love to live my life? And that's what you're working towards. And the whole entire treatment is revolved around targets to get to those goals. Now, the skills come in because they're going to help you, conquer some of these targets. So that's where they come in. Are the skills a matter of importance? It sort of depends on the client themselves, right? Some clients don't really have a lot of need for some of the skills that have to do with assertiveness training or things like that, like we call it Dear Man, how to ask for something or how to say no to something. Other clients really, really need help with that. What every client needs to know foundationally is what wise mind is, which is kind of one of the foundational DBT skills, which I'm sure you've shaken your head, like you know, everybody's heard of it, right? And wise mind as a word, wise mind, you hear that, it's actually synonymous with the universe. It could be synonymous with love or with God or my higher self. They all mean the same thing depending on where you're coming from. So it's my knowing self. It's my inner self. It's the part of me that does what works. And so it's important to know that and to be able to identify when I'm in my wise mind and when I'm not. And when I'm not in my wise mind, I'm in either emotion mind or reasonable mind, which both could get me into trouble. And so the skills then tell you what to do. What do I do if I'm in emotion mind? What do I do if I'm in reasonable mind? Emotion mind is when emotion is dictating your behavior. Your behavior is, something sets you off. You feel tense in your body and you want to do something now to make that tension go away. And you will make things worse 100% of the time. Okay. When you're in reasonable mind, obviously being reasonable is a positive thing, right? But being in reasonable mind is not, because when you're in reasonable mind, you're void of any empathy, any love, any perspective taking. It's all about, this kind of all or nothing thinking. This is right. This is wrong. This is how we do it. It would be like, if your child has a curfew of 11 and they want to stay out till midnight because it's prom night, there's this rigid, no, your curfew's 11. There's no room for movement. So it's just, helping people to recognize when they're in those other states versus, okay, how do I get back to wise mind? So that's fundamental. And then from there we go to, okay, what do you do if you're, okay, now I know I'm in emotion mind. What do I do now? So I don't do the thing that's going to get me in trouble. And so, helping people with reactivity. I mean, non-reactivity is one of the hallmarks of emotional intelligence, right? So if you could help people with do this instead, now all of a sudden we're not getting ourselves in trouble so much,
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to ask on behalf of, I imagine some listeners are like, Marjorie, tell us, or tell my husband or my wife, like when someone is lost, and I love the metaphor of who's driving,
Yeah.
so from both sides of the continuum of, if we think wise mind is the integration and who you really are in the middle, but you're lost in emotional mind or lost in rational or reasonable mind, what are some of the pathways to help you get back to uncovering your wise mind if you're lost on either side? You get my question?
Okay, I do. First and foremost, I love the name of this skill because it's so 101 that you can't forget it. Stop. Go to YouTube, look under our stop skill. Okay. Stop. Don't move a muscle. Take a step back. Look at what's going on inside of you and outside of you. Don't do the thing. Right. So stop is basically our way of inserting time. Okay. You want to insert time. So, but when you label it as, oh, I'm going to use the stop skill, it's a lot easier to access giving that gap of time than just by giving things a name, especially a simple name that you're not going to forget. You'll do it, right? Okay, now what do you do with the time? Okay, so now we have a variety of other skills we can move on to. You could distract yourself, you could self-soothe, you can do something that's going to improve just this one moment. And then we have this whole list of other skills that activate your parasympathetic nervous system. They actually change your biology so that you become a little bit more regular, less dysregulated, more just kind of calms you back down. There's one called TIP, which is the dive response. You put ice packs on your eyes and put your head down and hold your breath. Don't do that without talking to somebody, though, because you can't do it with a heart condition. But all of these things bring you down a couple notches, so then you could access the next skill and the next and the next and so forth.
And you're speaking to when you're hijacked by emotional dysregulation, not necessarily hijacked by the Spock disposition.
Yes, correct. And, those things, using, distracting yourself, self-soothe, even, we don't want those to be used every day. In fact, we want our clients to eventually need to use them just very, very infrequently, because what are those skills? Those skills are more ways of shoving our emotions under the carpet, which is why they came to therapy in the first place. Yeah. So it's a temporary thing to do for emergency use only. Okay. What we ultimately are trying to get to, which to me is one of the most important high level skills, is mindfulness of the current emotion. And that is where you can feel your feelings all the way through. You could sit there, you could be with them, you could feelings, emotion, emotion, energy, and motion. It's all energy in your body, right? You physically feel them, which is why we call them feelings. So if you actually sit with the physical sensations in your body all the way through, and even label them to yourself with ing words like, oh, it's pulling, it's pushing, I'm feeling it in my chest, now it's pulling this way, it's constricting, and you label them but fully feel them, and you place even more attention on them, and then more, and watch how they change over time. Within a couple of minutes or seconds, it will start to dissipate, and then it's like, oh, I just had my full emotional experience. I didn't have to shove it under the carpet. I could actually feel my feelings.
Yeah. So to consolidate what Marjorie is saying, and again, as an IFS guy, I'm thinking about it in terms of, all right, some of these skills are training the managers how to be better manager parts, but that in and of itself is just kind of like, well, you're in flight and your left wing is out, or the left engine's out, and your landing gear won't open. Like we have to take care of the stuff that's happening now. But we know that the right way to land a plane is to actually get it in good condition. But then we can actually land it, and we can actually follow it all the way through to the end of the runway. So when I hear you talking, I'm like, that's one of my pet peeves, is when clinicians are just training the managers and that's it. And so what we're doing is we're promoting the continual exiling of the feeling, and we're not giving that, which is burning up so much energy and so much potential in the person's life, as well as causing mayhem with others that they're connected to. So I love that there's naming something like the stop technique, right? So if I can just give a little self-disclosure here and say, for me, when I'm stressed out, boy, it's real easy to just go hit that vape pen, right? So it's like that. So it, and but that's also like my higher self knows that there's two things that's not great about that, right? It's very effective at helping Robin relax,
Yeah.
right? But what it's also effective at is preventing Robin from actually being with the thing that's intolerable, right?
100%, right? So it's a coping mechanism, right? And you've decided for yourself it's a maladaptive one. I would eventually like to replace it with being able to just be with my emotions without having to shove them down. And we all have coping mechanisms, right? For some of them, for some of us it's vaping, for some people drinking, for some people eating, for some people our cell phones. Most of us cell phones, right? You're scrolling just to like, let me not feel my feel. Let me just scroll through my phone for a while. For many of us, for me, busy, right? Oh, let me make a to-do list. Let me get all this stuff done. Let me be a workaholic, right? This is what we do.
Pro-social.
Yeah, right. So we all do these things. And how many of them are meant to, the problem with the busy one is the environment then tells you, Marjorie, great job. My God, look at what you built. Look at this company. Look how much you've gotten done. So now I'm getting reinforced by society saying, ooh, that's good. But actually what would be better is for me to just slow and stop and feel my freaking feelings,
Yeah. Yeah. And so one of the techniques of stop is, and it's what you hear in, like, if you listen to a Tara Brach or Jack Kornfield lecture, right, where they're just saying like, all what you just, there's that pause, if you want to be able to do something different, like a fundamental prerequisite of doing something different intentionally is buying time, right?
Yeah.
Is pausing, because you've just habitualized this other, like, okay, if A happens, then B, if A, then B, and you have practiced this neural groove. A happens, you're going to do B. So the only way we can kind of unlock that or build a new thing in the brain that's going to inhibit going to B when you feel A is to just pause for a second, and then you give your nervous system a fighting chance to do something different. And you say naming it, having a label, right? Like stop, increases the likelihood that the user, the client, will actually implement it. Now, I have a question for you, which is, when you have people who come in, whatever their grievances or their challenge, their problem, presenting problem, how do you help guide people that are very high functioning, very capable, and very resistant or stubborn, and say, look, I know about it. I know it. I practice it. And, but I also don't actually, I can get to the 70-yard line, but I never score touchdowns. I can never do the thing that you're helping me, that I'm paying you to help me do, but I can never do it. Right. Like, what are some of the, what are some of your success stories of finding people you're like, oh, Marjorie, you're my fifth therapist and no one can help me do this and blah, 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 right? You've been doing this long enough that you know exactly what the kind of profile I'm painting. So share your wisdom with our audience.
So first of all, if that is the continuous cycle, right? I come so close, I don't finish. I get to the 70-yard line, I don't go all the way. One of the things I would want to assess for is, are we making the goal too big? You will get so much further with hundreds of baby steps than trying to take 5 big steps and get nowhere, because we all get paralyzed if it's too big, And, there are 3 things that cause people to change, right? Choice, chance, or crisis. And hate for people to wait for crisis to make the change. And chance, okay, I win the lottery, things might change, right? But what are the chances of that, right? And then choice, that's hard. And so one of the skills actually in DBT that we talk about is willingness. So if you're only making it to the 70, probably willfulness is getting in the way. And so now, instead of targeting the thing that you need to do, we're going to just target willingness. We're going to target what's going to make you willing to do this thing. Because for any problem, we have 4 options, right? You can solve the problem. You could feel better about the problem. You could tolerate or accept the problem, or you could feel miserable. And what do you think most people choose?
I don't know.
Feel miserable. They inadvertently, because it's more of the same, right? So if the problem is,
I was thinking avoid. Was one of the menu options avoid the problem?
Well, that would fall into feel miserable,
That's
right?
that's what I was
It would fall
confused.
into that, and that's just people doing the same thing. So, if your issue is an unhappy marriage, right? You could solve the problem. You go get couples counseling. You could get a divorce. It's a solution, right? You could, try to work it out amongst yourselves without counseling. You could feel better about the problem. You could spend more time with hobbies and friends so that you feel more fulfilled in life. You could accept the problem, which would be saying, okay, I accept these things about my spouse. It is what it is. I don't like it, but I accept it's not going to change right now. Or you could feel miserable, which would mean I don't like these things about my spouse and it's not okay. They should be different. This is just not okay. And then you talk about it to your friends and family. That's what most people do.
Yeah, totally. I also think people are really good at lying to themselves. Really good. Self-deception. No one's immune. No one is immune from self-deception. And I get concerned about the false sense of acceptance, right? Like, oh, I have accepted it, right? Like, again, 95% of me has accepted this, but there's a 5% that's holding out for decades.
Yeah.
or you have the person that they come work with you and they heal and they realize, my God, that 5% has been holding out for decades and it's finally ready to accept.
Yeah, and it changes, right? You might have fully accepted something in one moment, and then the next day something happens, and all of a sudden you haven't accepted. You're back to non-acceptance, and you need to know when that happens, and come to that fork in the road of deciding, okay, am I going to turn the mind and work towards acceptance again, or am I going to stay in this area of non-acceptance? It's work, especially when the issue has to do with anything related to injustice or something that's not fair. I mean, fair is something the county runs, right? So we have to remember that, but we get caught up in this is not fair, this is not okay. And the reality is this is reality. I don't like it. And this is the way things are right now.
I was really appreciating and associating to one of Dr. Jordan Peterson's many lectures when you were talking about like the goal's too big and we need to incremental improvement. And I remember one of the things, the factorials that he was going through is like, well, okay, if your goal's too large, like again, in the spirit of you got to be honest with yourself, because if you're deluding yourself and you take yourself through this exercise, then and it's riddled with lies and snakes, then you're setting yourself up for it's not going to actually work. But the idea of like, okay, let me narrow it down to a baby step. What could I do that I'm actually capable of doing that I'm also willing to do?
Willing. Yeah,
right. Like I can do it, not willing to do it. Okay, if the answer to can I do it and am I willing to do it? If any of those are no, then you're aiming too high and you need to lower the scope. Yeah. I also want to circle back that I don't know that some listeners might be thinking when they listen to our conversation, like, Robin, you never asked Marjorie to get us from like, that's all fine and well if you're blended with an emotional, you're lost. But how do we get back to wise mind if we're lost in the logical and the rational? And I argue with my wife and I just don't get it makes no sense. And we go in this loop and loop and loop. And she criticizes me about being too rational or whatever. So how do you get to wise mind from the other side? I don't think we covered that.
Yeah, totally have to address willingness first, right? I mean, I've met people who, have a very strong opinion about something, and they want more relationships in their life, but they're not willing to hear another perspective. So if you don't have the willingness to be open, to be curious, then that's a choice, right? So you have to first start with that willingness to make the choice. And to get out of that mindset, it's all about openness and curiosity. It's all about being willing to learn and working towards perspective taking skills. Okay, I have this point of view, and I strongly believe in this point of view. And let me try to understand why you have this other point of view. Help me to understand. I'm not going to change mine, but I want to understand. I want to know what that would be like. I want to know, what in society, what in your life, your upbringing, your group of friends has made you have this, tell me why you have this other point of view. Let me understand it because it makes sense for some reason. Now we can start to get a little closer, have an understanding.
So that makes perfect sense to me, that one of the ways to unlock your rational, or I guess to unlock yourself from the clutches of the rational mind to get back to wise mind, is curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think curiosity is like, God bless Curious George and helping our children like celebrate that virtue. Because as a clinician, a healer, curiosity is such a great like carbon monoxide detector. It's the thing, like if someone can't get curious, then now we know there's something blocking
Right.
from being able to change. And because are you really going to take on board new information if you're not curious? You can feign curiosity, right? Like and not only that, you can have curiosity that is attached to like, I gotta know this. And if I don't know this, bad things will happen, that's like fearful or anxious curiosity versus true, authentic, relaxed curiosity, compassionate curiosity even. So that all makes sense. I wanted to ask you though, what do you do with a client who is finding it very difficult to get curious?
Is it that it's very difficult, or is that they're holding so tight to righteousness that there's not the willingness? Because if it's the latter, I would probably say, what's more important, being right or getting along? Do you want to have friends or do you want to be right?
Is that, I'm curious, is that a Gottmanism or a Linehanism? Like,
or it's really Linehan, but
okay.
it could, there's so many parallels,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's just, you know, I use like stupid examples. Like, I was talking to, I said to somebody, okay, you're talking about the movie Shawshank Redemption, and your friend says, oh yeah, Clint Eastwood starred in that. And Clint Eastwood's on the movie. And then it's turning into like a thing, like an argument. Is it so important to be right? Do you have to be that person that's going to look it up on your phone and prove to them? See, I told you, like, do you win? Do you win in those situations? Like sometimes we just, it's, having that perspective taking, in DBT, we call it mindfulness of others, like understanding what the other person would feel like in this situation. What does it feel like for you when somebody says, see, I told you, like, it feels pretty shitty. Like, you don't want that,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate your answer. And, when I ask what might be blocking someone from being curious, and for you to associate to, okay, are they gripped by righteousness?
Yeah.
Are they possessed by it? Especially our conversation started out talking about autism, and I'm thinking about some of the challenges with perspective taking in that
Yeah.
community,
Well,
and yeah, go ahead.
And let's even go back to, so if you're gripped by righteousness, right? Okay, it's the same thing as what we talked about when you're in emotion mind, or you have this thing, and if I don't do this thing, I'm going to have this like pressure in my body. I just want to make it go away. It could be the same as like wanting to vape. I want to vape, and once I vape, I'll feel that relief, right? So what if instead you just urge surf? What if you just allow yourself to have the urge, but you don't necessarily need to act on it? I could have the urge to want to be right. Doesn't mean I have to act on it. I could have the urge to want to lift up my vape pen. Doesn't mean I have to do it. I could fully feel the want of the urge. And I could think of how empowering that is to fully want the urge to pick up a vape pen and not do it. Like, wow, I could have that control. For me, shopping, I could go into a store and have an urge to buy this sofa that is way too expensive, that I don't really need. But oh my gosh, I make up this story that's going to change my whole life, and my family's going to all sit in it together, and we're going to feel so connected to each other because it's so comfortable and whatever. And yet it doesn't really fit in my room and it's too expensive. I could sit with fully wanting that. Doesn't mean I have to do it.
Yeah, I imagine the stakes. Like, let me give you an example. When you said that's a really fascinating phrase. I've never urge surfing, right? The idea of being consciously aware of the urge, and then staying there. So the thing that I associate to, my wife and I were, I don't know, we were watching maybe the news, whatever, or a program, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. But what I remember is we each had our own flavor of Haagen-Dazs ice cream, like whatever pint size, whatever it is. And she's eating mango, and I think I finished whatever I had, right? I finished it. And I was deep into the trenches of like Tara Brach, Jack Cornfield, mindful, like banked many lifetime hours of mindfulness, and I'm seeing the opportunity. Okay, oh, notice the thought. Okay, all right, ask Kelly if you can have a bite of the mango, right? And I privately have that thought, And I go, oh, here it is. Here is the opportunity to notice the urge, right? Like I clearly had an agreement of like, this is the amount and like, that's their amount. We could swap, like we could, do you want to try this, that? But like, this is now like wanting more of hers is everyone inside of my head knows, right? And my heart knows like, that's the betrayal or whatever. So I'm like, oh, okay. Let me just, here it is. It's washing up upon the shores. Let me just be with it. All right. So, and then it went away.
Yes.
And then it went away. And then I said, oh, hey, look at that. She doesn't even know that I that I wanted her mango ice cream. 5 minutes later, here, knock, knock, Robin. Let's ask, you still want that mango? Right. So it comes, it like a wave, right? It comes
Waves,
up, low tide, back to high tide now. Now that's just ice cream. That's not something where I'm not like, eating the mango sorbet afterwards and being like, I'm such a piece of shit. I'm so fucking fat. I'm like, the critic doesn't get, that's low stakes stuff. The vape pen, especially as a clinician who's doing all this work on himself, going to THC realm I'm fully aware that I'm knowingly re-exiling the thing that's showing up. So urge surfing with that is I guess I'm comparing the little league, which is the mango Haagen-Dazs, and then the big time, which is full on substance abuse and addiction and getting away from Robin's earlier traumas or whatever, right? And so just the concept of virtue, I guess I want to like maybe invite people to consider that they're not all equal and that some urges are going to be more difficult than others. And you know, I suppose it just takes practice, because I do remember being in my kitchen having the vape pen urge. And I asked my internal community, I said, is everyone okay with this? Are there any dissenters? And one of my parts said, I'm afraid I can't get in touch with you if you do that. I won't be able to get in touch with you. And I said, okay, fair enough. We're not going to do it then. And so that Robin at that time of day is not the constant being of light, right? It's like, it just so happens that I was able to resist the urge that time. It's not always going to be that way, you know?
It's not always going to be that way. And you could even use the baby step concept with something like that, right? You could even say, okay, I'm just going to wait 5 extra seconds before I do it, because now you've had a success, right? You've inserted a little bit of time. You know, you got to remember, what we resist persists, right? So
that's right.
Shove something down and resist it, it's just going to become bigger. But if we can practice like regulating by just inserting a little bit more time, or, you know, finding other ways, but you know, and sometimes it's going to work. I love your ice cream example, and I love the example in the kitchen where just one part of you said, not on board, you know, and you know, that worked that time, you know?
Yeah. What do you make of, we were talking about the differences between like DBT is not just all skills, and there are sort of axioms that the model invites people to consider. And one of the ones that I really enjoy, but I find that sometimes clients have a hard time buying into, is everyone, especially in couples therapy, everyone's doing the best they can at any given time. When you like sample someone, like just like at any given time, they're doing the best they can, right? The person who's like bet the farm, you know, like driving the car off the cliff, they're doing the best they can. And there's resistance to that, or there's skepticism about that. How do you introduce, or is that something that you even explicitly mention? Like, I guess I'm curious how you play with that idea in your clinical work.
So it's not a standalone, right? You know, I call DBT sometimes the and therapy, because you know, you go to some DBT training and by day 2, everybody's like, da 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 da, and da 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 da, and we say the word and like very enunciated. It's like a big thing. So, you know, everyone's doing the best that they can, and they want to do better, and they need to try harder, be more motivated to change, and so on. So it's not a standalone, right? But if you think about it, everyone's doing the best that they can in this moment. It doesn't mean we don't want them to be better, right? Somebody could be talking about, you know, a caregiver who they didn't do the best they can. They were horrible. They should have done better. You know, in that moment, they did the best that they can, given their life experiences, their traumas, their this, their that, whatever they had to work from in that moment. And I wish they did better, right? And I needed more. So when you combine it to the other pieces, it's not a standalone. It's not just saying, oh, they did the best they can. That's okay. No problem. You know, it's really honoring all of it.
No, I follow all that. I guess I appreciate you sharing that it can't be isolated and it's got to be connected. I'm curious how you meet people that say, well, that's bullshit. Right? Like how do you how do you help someone navigate that? How do you help someone consider that that's true when they're like, that's fucking bullshit. No, that's not the best they can. I know they can do better than that. Maybe a parent and their kid, you know, it's like, I know they could do better than, and you're sitting there like, you know, maybe it's too didactic or psychoed to just spit out, well, everyone's doing the best they can. And that's also could be maybe invalidating of the person who's complaining about that, right?
Yeah, I think you have to focus on more on the other end of the dialectic, and you needed more. You needed to do better, you know, and a lot of times it's not even about another person. I am not doing the best that I can. It might be themselves, and they're clinging on to shame, right?
100%.
Clinging on to guilt or shame, or, you know, and staying in that space. And, you know, when they become willing, they will do better. It's, and really tying in, and I want to do better. And I, you know, so tying it into what needs to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to ask you, I'm so grateful for your presence and your time and your willingness to come to the show and share this with our audience. And how long have you been doing this work, the work that you're doing now?
So I went back to graduate school in 2011, finished in 2013-ish, fast tracked it, worked 3 jobs to support 3 kids for a couple of years there, and to get my restricted licensure taken care of. Started private practice in 2015 and started my group practice in 2017. It was really, really quick in the big scheme of things, you know, and it's funny because it's actually shocking to myself, because I would have been one of those people, like, if I thought about, oh my God, I got to finish all of graduate school, I probably would have gotten paralyzed and not done it. But for whatever reason, I was able to just focus on just this one next thing. Okay, just this one paper, just this one exam, just this one. And I baby stepped it the whole way through. And it's amazing how fast it all happens when you do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the power of baby steps and incremental improvement is this kind of segues to my next question. It's a very powerful thing. And I was curious. The reason why I asked how long you've been doing it in your time, focusing your energy professionally, doing this work. And maybe you've thought of this, maybe you haven't. So that's okay. If you could think of your top 5 or your top 3 in terms of what are the most powerful things that you've learned as a person who is helping people heal and transform and find more meaningful change in their lives, alleviate suffering, what do you associate to? What makes your like gold? You don't have to have them rank ordered as this is first, but just in your 5 or 3, like what are some of the most powerful and potent and maybe even most accessible? Like, it doesn't matter who you are and what your grievance is, this is going to help you. What do you associate to?
You know, it really partially depends on what somebody's come in with, but I will tell you the things that have been so hugely impactful to me are when I've worked with clients that have come from the most dire places. I've had many, many people that have come straight from hospital. They were recommended DBT, they come, and you know, they come in and, you know, you're working really hard with them to help them build the hope, to see what can be. And when you follow a protocol, and I'm not a structured person, I hate structure. So I was very resistant to DBT at first. I have diary card, I wouldn't do it myself, no freaking way. But when you see how it works, and when you see people come out the other end and say, oh my gosh, you know, I love my life now. People who've had multiple attempts and nothing since. And, you know, then I hear from them years later, like, can't thank you enough. Can't believe how different my life is since this work. I've never hurt myself since. It's amazing. We don't know it all. We can't just figure it out ourselves. When there's been research to show that some things work, it's right there for you. Use them, right? Because it's just such a beautiful thing to see people make it all the way through that. It's just, you can't even describe what that's like. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yes. No, I totally hear you, and it is ineffable. And I'm still listening, or I'm still waiting for what provided that. What do you think or feel? What is your intuition in terms of the medicine that you give? You're not a prescriber. You don't
Right.
right?
Right.
But
Right.
you're offering some form of medicine to people that help them stop cutting or attempting suicide, or what. So again, I'm curious. I ask on behalf of
Yeah.
listeners, but also my own quest, for saying, hey, there's lots of stuff out there. Lots of it's shit.
Yeah.
Let's give people the nutritious and effective medicines that will help them heal. And I kind of know what makes my list, but I want to hear from you and your experience. And what are the medicines, metaphorically speaking, that you offer people that get successfully uploaded, right? What is it? Because there's, again, you could point to, I mean, you've been doing this for so long. Grad school's rigorous. There's just lots of books.
Yeah.
So boiling it down to the essentials, and
Yeah.
maybe this is greedy to even ask this question. I don't know, but what do you, from your perspective, what are the most potent medicines that you've given your clients?
I would say, I don't know if you're familiar with like being in your zone of genius, right? Your zone of genius is when you're in flow. You're one with what you're doing. Okay. So not your zone of excellence. There are plenty of people who are excellent at what they do, maybe better than most people, but they're not one with it. So when you're one with something, if you're skiing and you're one with the mountain versus you're a great skier, but you're like kind of not, you're not fully there. You're not fully present. When you could access that zone of genius, you're one with it. We could call it wise mind too. When I'm in that state, I don't have to do anything, right? It's just working right through me, right? I'm like a conduit almost, right? So it's just, so what I would say, the main thing is to stop figuring it out. There's nothing to figure out. Just be in the moment and allow it to flow through you, and that's being one with my client so that we can then have this connection and I could feel what needs to be done, right? I'm not having to think and figure it out and get caught up in my head. I'm just like with them fully. So I feel with them, I feel their pain. Not to their extent, of course, I can't pretend to be there, but I feel, and I want healing for them so badly that I feel that too. And I can carry the hope for them when they can't, because I know it works. And it just becomes effortless,
Yes, I do. Yes. So I really appreciate that answer. It happens to track in my own experience, and I really, I'm grateful to you for articulating it the way you did. Yeah, the trust in self and the confidence to run the experiment that you're thinking and figuring it out are positive intentioned as they may be, are actually gumming up the gears here, and letting you flow is the most powerful way to help someone heal on their schedule, that they're ready to do it
on their schedule. It's all about that trust, that inner trust, because then it just all flows. And for me, as I do I still do some clinical work. Rarely do I take a new client at this point, because I'm training and supervising and doing and trying to then communicate that to others. And so on a larger scale, the key is that we build our whole business around our core values. If you don't meet our core values, we're not going to bring you on board. If we find that you're on board and you don't meet our core values, you're not a fit for us. It's all about core values. Anybody can learn things in a book. That doesn't mean anything. You need to be able to have that ability to access that part of yourself to truly help people, and have, and then get the training that we could do. But having those two things combined, that's what helps people heal.
Yeah. You also mentioned hope, that you can carry the hope for them when they are in the darkness.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can share, again, what organically comes forward to mind in terms of how do you, how do you help someone who has lost all hope? How do you share the hope that you have? I mean, I get it intellectually in terms of it works. I know it'll work. They just have to like be open to giving it a chance. But there's still that kind of like selling component. And even if, I mean, your prior occupation was marketing, so it's what it's like to come on too strong, right? You don't really want to be selling something, but you're inviting them, right? And I'm just kind of curious, when you're Marjorie Kreppel, the hope merchant, like
the hope merchant. I love that. I'm going to put that on my business card. I love it.
Well, that's a Dick Schwartzism, right? In IFS, that's like, it's one of the things that's like hope merchanting. But I'm curious from your perspective, how does that actually look with someone in the darkness? Someone who is like, I'm too fucked up. This will never work. You're our 8th therapist or whatever, right? Like, how do you bring that light of hope to people?
Okay. So, look, I mean, be honest here. I'm not going to feel that in all situations, right? So, when someone comes in and they don't have the readiness to do the work, and we try every single commitment strategy to get them to a place where they have the readiness to do the work. But if they're just really close to the work, I'm not going to be able to access that within myself. Okay. But when someone comes in and there is that openness, or we could get them there, because we have plenty of things that can help them to get there. It just comes, right? It's just there. It's just part of the system. I'm trying to think of an example. I keep going back to when you were talking about righteousness and being in reasonable mind. I'm thinking about someone I worked with, and they just like, yeah, I'm miserable. I don't have friends, and I'm struggling with restrictive eating and this and that and the other thing. And then every time we got into any piece of willingness, it was just more important to be right than to start to work towards those goals. And so you just keep dropping those breadcrumbs. But I can't access that part of myself that I'm generating all the hope. It comes as they get there. But when someone's with me in it and they're open to the possibility of change, it's just right there. So it's not like I could just snap my fingers and every single person who walks in the door. You have to do your own work, right? It's not, the therapist can't do it for you. This is not the good old American system. Take a pill and you're all better. It's we have to work together.
Yeah. No, that's right. There's two, I appreciate your answer. And there's two things that spring forward. The first thing that I was popping with, like you're saying, well, first of all, I can't access that hope for everyone because of where they're at, their willingness. And the first thing I associated to, I had an interview with Bob Falconer, and he's an IFS guy, and he was saying, you can't help everyone, Robin. And I know that's true. But he followed it up with, he told a story about someone who's in a psych unit, and they do like 15-minute bed checks for suicide. And, they want to kill themselves so bad that they have to be looked after every 15 minutes. And one person, they were like, they need to be checked on every 5 minutes. And they still killed themselves. You can't save everyone. And that story breaks my heart. And so much of me wants to rail against that and be like, if you play the puzzle and game of life correctly, there is an actual, right? So there's that resistance to that reality.
Yeah, we have freedom of choice.
Yeah. but then, okay, so then the other thing that I associate to, and this I might totally split the room, lose a lot of our audience, maybe even you, which is the um the hope that comes with immortality. So getting into a little bit more spiritual realm and saying, well, it may be the case because they have their own free will and they're going to do what they do, and all you can do is provide guidance. You cannot do it for them. You cannot do it for them. And I get that. That if they lose their life, one of the things that provides me with this eternal flame of hope is the conviction of immortality, and that, well, if they killed themselves in this life as Robin or as Marjorie or as someone else, as the listener, they didn't learn the lesson this time. But their body has an expiration date, but their true essence and their true nature does not. And they'll be able to, the lesson will be repeated until it's learned. And you don't have forbidden knowledge to know when that is for someone. So that kind of floods me with hope on the time has no boundaries and immortality. It's just like, well, when you talk about like baby steps, now do the opposite and just zoom it way the hell out and say, okay, well, there's hope for every single soul. And it's not, you don't get to know who's ready to learn their lessons on their own timeline.
Yeah, that resonates with me. And, suicide is a solution, right? It's not the problem. DBT is not an anti-suicide treatment. It's a building life worth living treatment. And people have freedom of choice, and we don't take it off the table as a possibility, right? So people sometimes need that on the table as a possibility, but hey, let's try this first, right? Let's look at these other options first, because I can't help somebody get to their goal if they take their life. Now they've screwed it. We can't get their goal. You have to be alive to get to your goal. So, it becomes tricky, but it is, I hear what you're saying, and I've seen what you're describing in terms of, these cycles keep repeating themselves until we do it differently, until we do it right. And, sometimes in order to break a cycle like that, you have to get out of hell first. You're in hell. You're in the basement of this 4-story house. This is like the model of DBT. It's on fire. And in order to get out, you have to climb a metal ladder barefoot. It is really hard. You are in tremendous despair. And in order to get out of there, it's got to even get worse. Okay. But once you get to the first floor, okay, it's a little bit easier. And then eventually you get to even the second floor and the fourth floor, which is really all about spirituality, right? It's like, but it's not easy to get there. And you need to have somebody holding your hand, and you need to be open to holding their hand back and doing it together.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I'm associating to the Churchill quote, keep going.
Yeah.
When you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about, what did your parents do for a living?
Okay, so
is a hard turn from the clinical. We've been playing in the clinical playground, and I just are your parents retired? Are they still with us? You mentioned mom's birthday or someone's birthday, right?
So I'm in Florida right now because I am throwing my mother a surprise 80th birthday party Friday, which maybe she doesn't know about.
That's a big one.
Don't film this before Friday. My father passed away 3 years ago. My father worked for IBM for all of his career. He then started like a small business at the tail, in the beginning of retirement, and smartest man I've ever met, like just a brilliant, supportive, intelligent person. My mother, also an entrepreneur, ran a travel agency. This was before deregulation, when you could actually have a successful travel agency, extremely successful, had a successful career, very, very social, lots and lots of friends, talk about extrovert, like just out there. So I have this huge party I'm throwing. And so I'm here now getting prepared for this whole thing, which has just been a little bit of a fiasco, but yeah. So I grew up in upstate New York, just a beautiful place to grow up, beautiful place where, it's just like a lot of wholesomeness. Everybody's the same. So socioeconomically, it's just an easy, there's no keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. It was just a great upbringing.
Where in upstate New York?
A small town called Vestal, outside of Binghamton.
Okay. What did you like about where you were raised?
Oh, it's amazing. Well, we were outside all the time. Back then, we were all outside all the time. I mean, we had the local drive-in theater that we could, just right down the street, and the mini golf right there. And there was no big stores or it was just like we did everything outside, and we're just, me and my friends in high school would just all meet in this rock quarry and have parties there. It was just easy and fun, and just really true and deep friendships.
Mm, mm. What do you do for fun?
Oh, I'm a big outdoorsy person. I during the pandemic, I went to with one of my kids and cousin around his age. I rented a camper van and we just started traveling all over the place. And I would work remotely, like on my busy work days, I'd get an Airbnb and work, and then we'd travel. And I love to hike. I love nature. I love beauty. I love being one with nature. Did that for a while. A couple years later, actually bought a camper van, and there was a period of time in between selling my house and deciding where to live next. I actually lived in the camper van for about 6 months, which was a really cool experience.
Wow.
I love to ski. I'm not very good at it, but I love to ski. I'm a very, very social person. My community, my friendships are the most important thing to me. And I love business. I love the business of psychotherapy. I love, I have loved building a business. We, started, a process. I'm very involved in an entrepreneurial organization. I love all of that. Love, I'm in a master's program right now at MIT through my entrepreneurial program. Just love learning. I love learning business, love training other people, and helping people to help people, like all of that stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I totally resonate with the notion of one person, one-to-one helping is not fast enough to mitigate against the forces of suffering. It's like we got to scale
Yeah.
up, scale
Yeah.
up. So you can bring so much good into being in that realm of training others, and
Yeah.
even scalable using technology. So autodidacts who can, if they're not ready to do synchronous therapy with you, they can start to learn about this stuff on their own. All that stuff. It's great.
Well, I'll
Um,
tell you what happened. The pandemic happened, right? And at the time of lockdown, we were one small group practice. We had about 12 of us in Bethesda. Okay. And then we had a waiting list of like 60, 70, 80 people. I couldn't sleep at night. So we did two things. One is through the whole pandemic, we did this thing called Chat with CCM. We were Counseling Center of Maryland back then. And 3 times a week, 3 mornings a week from 9 to 10, we had a free join-in session for the community at large. Anybody could come, and it was just a free place for support. It wasn't, we had a little disclosure. This is not therapy. This is
yeah.
support. It's for whatever. But
Yeah.
and we had some pretty packed days. I mean, people loved it. We had our regulars. It was just a way to give back and support people during that time. But then we still had this waiting list. And so I'm like, this is not okay. People cannot be on a waiting list who need help. So hired and trained, hired and trained, hired and trained, and we got it going. And we have an incredible team, and that's my commitment, right? I can't help that many people by myself, right? But I could help like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people through people, and not just the people, but their families and my employees' families, as well as the families. It's just, it extends on and on and on. So, my commitment is to doing it right, doing it adherently, maintain the gold standard, having passion in what we do. If somebody's not the right fit, that's fine. They just won't stay with us. And like really being able to do this on a broader scale, because it's so needed.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious what special skills or talents that you have that maybe people have no idea, that you've never maybe talked about in decades. Like, cause you might have your canned answer for that, where it's like, well, when I'm not doing this, like some people don't know I ski or whatever, but like, is there a special skill or talent that Marjorie Kreppel has that people don't know about, that you haven't showcased in like
So
many, many years?
do you know anything about the Enneagram? Do any Enneagram
Oh
work?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and
Okay.
I know of the Enneagram, and people keep telling me, Robin, you've got to like do that and like get trained in and stuff. But I don't know it very deeply, shall we say?
So it's so funny because we did an internal training. We do a lot of fun internal trainings to create community within my thing. So we did an Enneagram piece of work, and everybody got typed, and it's funny. I'm the only 7, right? And of course I'm a 7, right? Like it's just such a fit for.
So what's a 7 for
A
listeners?
7 is a common thing for entrepreneurs, but I'm kind of like idea. It's like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. And so if you're like me, you probably can't work for somebody else. You probably need a really good support system of people that can help implement the ideas that you have. But we're just very creative, energetic people that have idea after idea. So that is, I thought that everybody was like that, but they're actually not. And so it is definitely different and unique from most people. I didn't see it as such a important talent, but it actually is. Now, what I also have to learn to do and really work on is not all my ideas are good ones. Many of them are. So I have to kind of use the stop skill when I have an idea, sit with it a little bit, because like, oh, do I really need to write that book? And, look at the time and whatever. And, and then I vet, and decide if this makes sense. So yeah, it's definitely unique to many people, but to me, compared to many people, I also, I thought it would be easy to open in additional markets and everybody will be like me and they'll get out there and they'll network and they'll build a whatever. And that's not a natural for everybody. So then you have to kind of pivot and shift and figure out, okay, how are we going to do that differently? Because, I can't clone myself. And then there are all these other strengths that other people have that I don't have at all. So, okay, how do we like utilize people's strengths and pick up on things that, I don't have every single strength. Of course, there are many things I'm lacking in. So it's putting all those pieces together.
Mm. Are you familiar with Inside the Actor Studio with James Lipton?
Mm-mm.
Okay, this is an old show. It's on Bravo. So I want to take us to kind of a lightning round here, where just I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions, and you can pass on any of them,
Okay.
or just whatever kind of free association. What is your favorite word?
Conviction. I don't know why. But
What is your least favorite word?
Well, I think I should pass on that one.
All right, you know what it is, but we'll pass. Okay, very good. What turns you on?
Passion.
What turns you off?
Negative energy.
What sound or noise do you love?
A stream.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Loud noises.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite curse word?
Fuck.
Mm-hmm. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I'm running some other kind of business. Still an entrepreneur, but different.
I'll sub-question that. Is any clarity on what the other business might be?
Something with beautiful things. I love to decorate, so maybe something in that world.
Mm-hmm. What profession would you not like to do?
Accounting.
No hesitation. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome.
Hmm. And finally, so those are all James Lipton's questions. I'd like to kind of write my own, but for now I'm just pilfering or robbing, stealing from him. Is there any question that, before we close, is there any question that I should have asked you, or any topic area that we should have covered that I would have been completely foolish to have Marjorie Kreppel on and not talk about X, Y, or Z?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I guess maybe the only thing I would touch on is, sometimes we have a set plan. In the beginning, we were talking about how I got into this, right? And I mentioned, I was in the food industry, and then I was working for Autism Speaks, and then went back to grad school. But sometimes we have an idea of our direction, but having that flexibility around it becomes so key. All I knew was that I took this advanced training and then I realized, oh, actually, I want to help this kind of people. I really like helping people with severe emotion dysregulation. And then I went this direction, that direction. And the reason I started a group practice in the first place was back to the loneliness, right? So when I was in solo private practice, I let my space from somebody else, and I'd see her maybe once in a blue moon in the hallway. It was very lonely, very isolating. I wanted a community. I wanted a tribe. And so having the people in the coffee room became very important to me. And so, creating that is what started the whole thing. And then the expansion happened with the pandemic and so forth. But I think what I would definitely share with people, and I love the fact that, okay, you're not going to re-sign your lease and so forth, but you're thinking ahead, like, I'm going to compensate, right? I'm going to make sure to attend these community things so that I don't get isolated. I'm an extrovert. I need to do these things. And I would just, say to people in general, like, don't underestimate the value, the importance of face-to-face contact. Sometimes it's easier to just stay home all day. We all have more and more opportunity to do that, but what it's doing for our mental health is not helpful, right? It's make sure if your job is remote, you compensate. Make sure you get out there. The little smalls in life, the barista at Starbucks and that little interaction, they matter. All these little things matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that message. Where, for folks who want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
counselingcentergroup.com is our website. And again, at YouTube, you could look up counselingcentergroup.com, skills groups, and they could access those, at any time. But yeah, that's our website.
Fantastic. Marjorie, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. It was great to be here. I really enjoyed talking to you.